Hello, everyone. Welcome to Cyber Violence, Navigating Hate Online. Thank you for joining this webinar, this is a Facebook Live. I'm excited to be doing this. So I am Kelsey Adams. I am one of the public education coordinators at Inova. And so we are a sexual assault center and women's shelter here in London, Ontario, Canada. Some people think we're in England. We're in Canada. So I wanted to thank you for joining us and to thank neighbors, friends, and family for having me here to talk about this really important topic. So a couple of introductions that I wanted to make before we got into things. So I wanted to sort of let you know about myself and sort of Inova and the work that we do. So as I mentioned, we're a sexual assault center and we are a women's shelter, so we offer lots of services to survivors of gender-based violence here in London and Middlesex County. I work in our education department, so I have the privilege of being able to have really important, kind of heavy conversations about consent, about sexual violence, about healthy relationships, about trauma, about what can we do when we see violence happening in our community. So I'm really privileged to be able to have those conversations and to have that conversation with you today. I also want to recognize that we're going to be talking about violence during our short time together, and so that can be really difficult. So it's really important that you take care of yourself, and that if you need to take a break, if this is becoming sort of overwhelming for you to listen to, whether you've experienced violence yourself or maybe someone that you love or care about has gone through a similar experience, to again make sure you take care of yourself. So if that means you have to take a break, please do that. This video will be on the neighborfriendsandfamily.ca website for you to go back to and see. They also have all of the other videos from their Healthy Love Talks in that page, so you can see all of those videos. So it's a great resource to be able to connect with. So as you can see on this side, there's been some new resources that are being put up, so feel free to look at them. I'm going to talk about them a little later, but if you have any questions or comments throughout, feel free to sort of say hi, jump on that sort of chat board, and we can have a bit of a conversation. As I mentioned, I'm also in London, Ontario, Canada, so really important for us to recognize the land on which I live and work on. So here in London, the Indigenous people whose traditional territory it is the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, and the Lenni Lenape people. And we have a lot of really great individuals and organizations here in London doing excellent work to address colonial violence here. And one of them is ATLOSA, Native Family Healing Lodge. And so if you're interested in them, they're a great resource and organization to check out. So we will get into the thick of things. So what is cyber violence? And we're going to specifically look at cyber sexual violence. So we can think of cyber violence as violence that's happening in cyberspace, kind of obviously, but it's really the use of technology to harass, to threaten, to embarrass, to target people sort of in our community. And when we look specifically at cyber sexual violence, it's sort of focusing on that sexual component. It's sort of focusing on someone's sexuality, someone's sexual orientation, their gender expression, or as a way to punish them because of their sexuality. And so we can think in other forms of sexual violence that certain people are targeted more often. So women and girls have higher rates of experiencing cyber sexual violence, along with other folks who experience increased marginalization. And I'm going to focus specifically on women and girls because I work at Inova, which is a gender-based violence organization, and that's my expertise. But I do want to recognize that other people can experience harm, other people cause harm. It's a very big conversation that we're going to be having in a very short amount of time. So this is much bigger than 30 minutes. I also wanted to recognize that even though I'm talking about women and girls, that's not one monolithic group, that there's a lot of diversity, a lot of different experiences that can fall underneath that, especially when sort of a woman or girl experiences other forms of marginalization, whether that's racism, colonialism, ableism, homophobia, biphobia, transphobia, whorephobia. Lots of other aspects of our identity can impact and increase our rates of experiencing that form of violence. I also use the term cyber violence specifically because I think it's important to recognize that it is an act of violence. It's not Sort of another term is cyberbullying, and I don't really like that term. I don't really like the term bullying in general, but I feel like bullying has this connotation that it's little kids doing it, it's sort of no big deal, it's not something to be sort of worried about. It's sort of kids being kids, it's boys being boys, it's, you know, oh, he pushed you into the dirt, oh, that must mean he likes you, and sort of all the other sort of really problematic ways that we raise our kids. But violence really holds that this is an act of violence and it needs to be taken seriously. We can also think that cyber violence recognizes that it's an umbrella term, that a lot of different experiences that can sort of fall under that umbrella, very similar to sexual violence. So we can think different types of cyber sexual violence that someone can experience. So they can experience cyber stalking, they can experience image-based sexual abuse, or sort of revenge porn is what like a lot of folks sort of casually use it, even though we really want to kind of push back against sort of the language of revenge porn. And if you want more information on why like revenge porn isn't the greatest name, another video that's on the Healthy Love web series is by Diane Lalonde, and she had a really excellent, succinct, accessible definition on why we need to be changing that language. In that video, she also talks about deep fakes and deep nudes. So another aspect of cyber sexual violence that a person can experience. They can experience doxing, so when your personal information is put online, so that harassment is no longer just a part of cyberspace, but also can affect you IRL, so like in real life, as the kids are saying. You can have like hacking and harassment and like trolling that can be a part of sort of your everyday experience on social media, sort of online gaming, and all different aspects of cyberspace. And it becomes so normalized. It becomes sort of a part of our everyday life as a woman or as sort of another marginalized person navigating these spaces. And sort of the pushback that people sort of often say, or that I see in the news or sort of in these conversations, is, well, just don't go on those sites. Don't be a part of that game. You know, don't have a public profile on Instagram or on Twitter, like whatever social media platform that you're using. And I think that's not realistic. Like, that's not the way that our world works. Our world is online. For so many millennials and sort of Gen Zers and like young people, like our lives are online. We grew up with this technology as being part of our everyday life. So just saying you need to get off those spaces, it isn't realistic, especially considering that our jobs, our livelihoods are connected to our online profiles for so many of us. You know, I run our social media for Inova, so you can follow us at Inova Future, another little plug. And so I spend my day on social media, and so many of us do. And so just to say, oh, you need to get off those spaces, it's not a realistic solution or a realistic suggestion to make to someone. And so it's about how can we make those spaces safer for all individuals to be able to enjoy, because it is the new public realm, it is the new town square. And so just in the same way that if you sort of walk down the street and you would experience street harassment, we don't want to say, oh, you shouldn't walk down the street, or you shouldn't go into that party, you shouldn't be in that neighborhood. No, I should have access as a person of this world that deserves dignity and deserves respect and deserves safety to be able to navigate this world however I please. And I should be able to navigate the online world sort of however I please. So really important that we want to sort of push back against some of that victim blaming that can so often come out when we're having conversations about cyber violence. And we're seeing this a lot in the media, especially when sort of celebrities have like their nudes or like their sex and like all that hacked and published online, which is an act of sexual violence, an act of cyber sexual violence. And so the pushback, and you see on like these talk shows where they're debating about like, well, why did she take that photo? She's a celebrity. She should know better. She knows she's going to get hacked. And so all of this pushback of it, especially that women, we shouldn't be able to express our sexuality. We shouldn't be able to sort of take sexy photos or take sexy videos or embrace our sexuality and celebrate our sexuality in a way that feels really good to us. That's just another form of victim blaming. And it happens in a lot of parts of our lives, especially for women and marginalized folks, that we need to police our own behavior. We need to change ourselves. We need to monitor ourselves and our sexuality so that we don't get victimized, so that that we're not hurt, as opposed to flipping that script, as opposed to changing that narrative and saying, well, maybe someone shouldn't leak my nudes. Maybe someone shouldn't share them. Maybe someone shouldn't harass me or troll me or send me pornography when I didn't want that. Like, why can't we flip that script? Why can't we put the accountability onto perpetrators where it really needs to be, and for me to be able to celebrate my sexuality in a way that feels really good. So I think it's important for us to recognize that we need to be able to push back against victim blaming. We need to be able to sort of hold ourselves and hold our communities accountable when violence takes place, and to hold perpetrators accountable to say, hey, that's not appropriate, that's an act of violence, and that's not right. So I think that's really important. And that can be done in sort of really big, obvious ways when we see sort of obvious, maybe intense examples of cybersexual violence. But it can also happen in sort of maybe smaller, less obvious, more insidious ways. And so I think one example of that I see a lot of is the jokes, is the memes, are these little moments where folks are able to sort of, oh, it's no big deal. That was my intention is to make people laugh. My intention is to make a joke. Oh, you just can't take it. Oh, you can't take a joke. You're a feminist buzzkill. Like you're, oh, this PC culture. That it's no big deal. Jokes are jokes. And you need to get over it, or you're not able to like handle it. You're not able to hack and like take it. You're not able to last on these platforms. But when I think about jokes, and when I think about the power that our jokes have, or that our language and our words have, they have meaning. They have a lot of power. So we can think when we're making a joke, and when we're sort of posting a meme, what is the person who's a survivor of sexual violence, or who's a survivor of gender-based violence, like when they see that? And they're seeing that sort of in their private space. They're scrolling Instagram at 2 o'clock in the morning because they can't sleep, which I have done. And like you see this violence, you see sort of someone making a joke about your experience, you see someone sort of laughing off an experience of violence as it's no big deal. Like what is that telling the survivor who's seeing that meme, who's seeing that joke? You're telling their experience is no big deal, to sort of laugh at it. And you're also telling them, hey, I'm not a safe person for you to come to. I'm not a safe person for you to talk to about your experience. And if we flip that, what are you telling the potential perpetrator? What are you telling the other people in your life that, oh yeah, this is funny, this is a joke, this is no big deal, go ahead and do it, because I'm not going to care. I think it's funny, I think it's something for me to laugh at. So the jokes and the meme and just like the general hate that is so often found in so many of our social media platforms, like it has a big power on like the impact that it has both on survivors and of potential perpetrators in our communities. So like these jokes have a big meaning that we want to be able to push back against whenever we can. So what happens when we're experiencing this victim blaming and we want to sort of push back against, I should be able to express my sexuality and embrace my sexuality and sort of just like put my whole authentic self out there for the world to enjoy, and sort of enter all these spaces. Like how do we hold that with also recognizing that because of my identity, I may be at increased risk for experiencing violence, and how do I keep myself safe? Like that tension can be really hard doing this. And that tension can be really hard to hold because we don't want to say, oh, you need to protect yourself because danger is always around, because the emphasis shouldn't be on me. I shouldn't have to police my own behavior. But on the other hand, violence is around for a lot of us. So like it's a hard tension to hold, and I don't know if I always get there myself. So I think it's important for us to recognize that there are steps, there are some like tips and tricks that we can use to keep ourselves safe. And there's a really great resource that I believe is on the sort of comment list for you to go to. But it's from iHollaback, which is, I'm just going to read it out. So they were a grassroots organization that wanted to challenge street harassment and to be able to sort of, in real life, that folks were experiencing. So they wanted to be able to push back against that and sort of call that out. And so they're able to transition not only to harassment that's taking place sort of on the streets and public spaces, but also harassment that's taking place in public spaces online. So how can we keep ourselves safe in those online spaces? So a couple of suggestions that they had that I wanted to share with you. One is to change your passwords often and to get better passwords, which I think a lot of us need to be doing. I know I need to. But Googling yourself, knowing what personal information is out there, especially because that can lead to doxing. So just Googling yourself, finding what's available. Limiting what you share. So like being mindful about what you're putting on public profiles, or like even if you want, like thinking about, do you want to have a public profile? Is it necessary? Is it going to benefit your personal self, your professional self? And really keeping that in mind and being self-reflexive about that. Blocking trolls, reporting abuse that you're experiencing, reporting harassment and violence that you're experiencing on these social media platforms. And I think we also, as a community and as a world, need to hold our sort of social media platforms accountable so that they actually do something, and that these trolls and that these perpetrators of abuse and of violence aren't able to sort of sneak the system and sort of get away with causing all of this harm, causing all of this violence. But important to recognize that we can hold these safety tips may be really helpful and may be really a way for us to reduce the violence that we can experience, but also even when we do experience violence, it is never our fault. It is never our fault when we experience violence. It is the fault of the perpetrators who cause us harm. And that's true for in online spaces and in real life as well. But it's not our fault, and that is a really, really important point that we want to be making. So if you do experience violence, and you do experience cyber sexual violence, what can you do? So again, not your fault, and that's a sort of a big statement, but a really important one to try to remember and to try to sort of hold in your heart during this, what could be like a really difficult or like confusing time. Knowing the platform settings, so like knowing what are sort of Twitter's rules, what is available on Twitter, on sort of the different social media platforms that you're on, what is available to you. So are you able to block? Are you able to mute? Are you able to report? Sort of knowing what the rules are so you're able to use those tools for your advantage and to be able to protect yourself. Also, if you're experiencing sort of harassment and sort of trolls are attacking you or threatening you, reporting everything and documenting everything. So not reporting, I mean, you can report if you want to, but documenting everything. So taking screenshots and trying to sort of get files so that if you do want to report, if you do want to have that as evidence, you've got that right then and there. And that's not an easy thing to do. It's not easy to have to comb through all of the hate or all of the trolls or all of the harassment that you're experiencing. That's a really big emotional labor act to have to do. So Hollaback, what I mentioned earlier, have a tool called HeartMob. And so it is sort of a grassroots organization, a grassroots collective of wonderful people in the world that can help you when you're experiencing that abuse. So if you're having to go through all of the different social media posts to say, oh, well, this is a threat, this is something that I need to take to the police. Yikes, this also just really hurts myself and now I can't carry on through the rest of the list. HeartMob says, here's all these people who are able to do that for you. So they go through all of the harassment and they document it all. So it's a really great resource to be able to lean on other people and have that sense of community and have that sense that you are not alone. And that unfortunately a lot of other people are experiencing this as well. You can also think stepping away from the platform, and like it sucks because I don't want to say, oh, you shouldn't be using that platform, you shouldn't be on Instagram or whatever it is, but that it is okay to sort of step away, and it is okay to sort of say, you know what, maybe today I don't spend my time on social media and I do something else, or I do something that's good for me and good for my heart. And yeah, it can make me difficult because I know I'm one to talk, but like our lives are on social media, like we're constantly connected to our phones and we're constantly connected to Instagram and Facebook and like all of that fun stuff. But to take those breaks and to make sure that we're enjoying those platforms and that it's not an obligation or something we feel like we have to do. We're enjoying and we're still having fun on those platforms, because technology should be used for good. It should be used for joy and for learning new things and seeing adorable cat videos. Like that's why I think the internet was created. And to be able to find those pockets of the internet, those pockets of social media where you're able to connect to your people, where you're able to find that sense of community, to be able to find people who are survivors like yourself or are going through the same things as you, and they're able to share and validate and listen. So important to find those spaces and to really hold on to them. So there was a comment that came in. Another thing that we can do is societal change. So Sarah said that we've become numb to victim blaming for those in the public eye as well as our peers. Challenging those people is needed, absolutely. We need to hold each other and our community and sort of our celebrities and our media accountable. You know, they need to be using the right words, as Femifesto says. another plug for them, but we need to be holding ourselves in our individual lives and also sort of our communities accountable for when they perpetuate this act of violence, because victim blaming is an act of violence that can continue the trauma, continue the negative effects of cyber violence. So again, really important, something that we want to challenge for them. Also, as I mentioned, so you can go through the resources that Neighbor Friends and Family put on the comment board. So it has a technical safety guide to protect yourself against online harassment. And in there, they have really specific steps around safety tips that you can do. They also have a self-care guide. So if you are experiencing this harassment, how can you take care of yourself? How can you put yourself first? How can you make yourself a priority when you're sort of going through this act of harm? So I wanted to sort of leave a little room if there's any questions that people want to put on the board. I will check. Not so much, but I wanted to sort of thank you for having this really quick, easy conversation about cyber violence. I hope I gave you some ideas that you can think of, or that you can Google or Bing or Ask Jeeves or however you search, that you can find out more information about this really important topic. Obviously, having a 15-20-minute conversation isn't enough, but you could spend whole PhDs talking about cyber-sexual violence. So this really is a quick little sneak peek at sort of what this topic is. So again, I wanted to remind you and also remind myself that we want to be taking care of ourselves. We talk about violence and it can bring up all sorts of feelings. So really important to take care of yourself. Also on that chat line, we do have different crisis lines that are available. So Inova has a 24/7 crisis line. Most sexual assault centers have one as well. So again, that's something that you can Google and find out what's available in your own community. To be able to do something good for yourself, to do that self-care, to make yourself a priority. So whether that's eating something delicious, good, talking and loving and cuddling and laughing and dancing with your loved ones, these are all ways that we're able to push back against the violence and the hate that we're experiencing online, is to find that joy in our real life and in our online spaces. So again, you can find this video and more videos on the neighborfriendsandfamily.ca website. So that's a great resource. And thank you so much for joining. I hope you have a wonderful day. Bye.